people saw the images from Caracas and drew the wrong conclusion. 200 US operators. One night, one captured leader, and suddenly the question spread across screens in Beijing and Taipei alike. Could this be done to Taiwan? At first glance, it feels plausible. Fast, surgical, clean. A war that ends before it begins. But strategy is not cinema, and power is never transferable by imitation. What happened in Venezuela was not a magic trick. It was the final move in a game already decided by years of internal decay, institutional rot, and uncontested dominance across every domain of warfare. Taiwan is not Caracas, and China is not facing a hollowed-out state waiting to collapse. If you care about Taiwan's future or the balance of power in Asia, this distinction matters more than any viral clip or headline. Stay with me, because to understand why this operation cannot be copied, we first need to strip away the illusion and define what this mission actually was and what it was not. Before we go any further, we need to clarify the problem itself. The real question is not whether China wants to copy what the United States did in Venezuela. It is whether the operation solved a strategic problem or merely exploited one that already existed. Operation Absolute Resolve was not designed to conquer territory. It was not meant to occupy, administer, or rebuild a hostile society by force. Its objective was narrow. Remove a single leader from a collapsing system and let an interim political structure take over. That distinction is everything. China's Taiwan problem is not about punishment, it is about control. Beijing does not seek symbolism. It seeks unification, governance, and irreversible authority over the island. A decapitation strike that leaves Taiwan's institutions intact does not achieve that goal. It risks escalation without delivering resolution. This is why surface-level comparisons fail. They confuse tactical brilliance with strategic suitability. They mistake speed for success. To understand why Venezuela allowed such an operation to work, we need to look backward into the conditions that made the system collapse-ready long before the first helicopter lifted off. Years before the raid in Caracas, the outcome was already being written. Venezuela was not defeated in a single night. It had been hollowed out slowly by economic collapse, institutional distrust, and a regime that centralized power while eroding legitimacy. The state still existed, but its cohesion did not. This matters because decapitation only works when the body is already failing. The United States exploited a system where loyalty was transactional, command chains were brittle, and the population had long lost faith in governing authority. When Maduro was removed, there was no resilient structure to absorb the shock. Power did not transfer downward, it simply gave way. Taiwan exists in a different historical cycle. Its political system is not built around a single figure. Authority flows through law, elections, and institutional continuity. Leadership is replaceable by design. Governance persists even under stress. That is why comparisons collapse under scrutiny. They ignore how political systems absorb or resist force. Military power can remove a person. Only systemic weakness allows the removal of a state. And this brings us to the first critical stress test. What happens when decapitation meets a system designed not to break? The first real test comes when theory meets friction. In Venezuela, friction was minimal. In Taiwan, it would be immediate. A decapitation attempt is not just a military act. It is a political shock designed to cascade confusion at the top, paralysis below, surrender at the edges. That cascade never materialized in Caracas because the system was already brittle. Military loyalty was uncertain. Civil society was exhausted. Institutions were shells. Now imagine the same shock applied to Taiwan. The result is not collapse. It is resistance. Taiwan's political system is built with redundancy, multiple branch, clear succession, independent media, an alert, mobilized public. Remove one leader and another steps forward legally, immediately, visibly. Instead of confusion, you get continuity. Instead of paralysis, you get legitimacy reinforced by attack. This is the first mini-crisis Beijing would face. Not military failure, but political inversion. A strike meant to intimidate would harden resolve. An operation designed for speed would trigger mobilization. What was meant to end the conflict could instead begin it on Taiwan's terms. And once that dynamic is set in motion, the problem no longer stays local. Beneath the surface, an even deeper mechanism is at work. Decapitation strategies assume that power is centralized, brittle, and personal. They work best against systems where authority flows downward from a single node and collapses when that node is removed. That assumption does not hold in Taiwan. Taiwan's defense posture is not built around preventing attack. It is built around surviving it. Over years, Taipei has invested in counter-decapitation by design, leadership protection, command continuity, distributed decision-making, regular exercises built around the assumption that the worst will happen first. This changes the logic of coercion. In Venezuela, the United States achieved total domain dominance information, cyber, air, and ground before its forces ever touched down. That level of integration requires not just advanced technology, but decentralized command and joint force maturity. China is still rehearsing that system. Taiwan is already living under it. This creates a dangerous asymmetry. The attacker must be perfect. The defender only has to endure. A failed or incomplete decapitation does not reset the clock. It accelerates escalation. It exposes intent without delivering control. And once that mechanism is triggered, Beijing would face a second, far more consequential crisis, one that no special operation can contain. The second crisis would not unfold in Taipei. It would erupt far beyond it. The moment a decapitation attempt fails or even partially succeeds, the conflict escapes the military domain and enters the strategic one. In Caracas, escalation stopped because no major power was willing to contest the outcome. China and Russia protested, but they did not intervene. Venezuela was not a core interest worth risking confrontation. Taiwan is different. The United States and Japan do not view Taiwan as transactional. They view it as structural to regional stability, to alliance credibility, to deterrence itself. A Chinese operation, even a surgical one, would trigger immediate external reactions. More forces forward deployed, more intelligence sharing, more political alignment against Beijing. What was intended as a rapid coercive move would instead compress timelines. Diplomacy would harden, sanctions would accelerate, military postures would shift before Beijing could control the narrative. This is the paradox of precision. The cleaner the strike, the clearer the intent, and clarity invites counteraction. At that point, China would face a choice it sought to avoid: escalate further or stop short and absorb strategic failure. Neither outcome resembles Caracas, and neither favors the initiator. Which brings us to the people who would bear the cost first. Not generals, not strategists, but ordinary lives caught at the center of calculation. For the people on the ground, the impact is immediate and deeply personal. In Venezuela, shock was contained. The population was already demoralized. The removal of one leader did not ignite widespread resistance. In Taiwan, the story would be different. Civil society is alert, engaged, and organized. Citizens are trained to respond, to question, to mobilize. A decapitation strike would not silence them, it would galvanize them. Fear transforms into defiance, confusion into coordination. Families, communities, and institutions would act to preserve normalcy and governance. The public would watch every move, measure every response, and adapt in real time. This is where strategy meets humanity. Operational planning may map terrain and target leadership nodes, but it cannot map civic spirit. It cannot replicate the social cohesion that turns shock into resilience. And here lies a critical lesson. Military precision alone cannot achieve political submission. Even if the leadership falls, the people remain the true safeguard of continuity. This is why any Chinese replication of Caracas would not just face tactical friction, it would encounter a political and social environment designed to absorb the shock. At the global level, consequences ripple far beyond the island itself. In Caracas, reactions were mixed but contained. Latin American neighbors debated, protested, or quietly observed. The US had room to maneuver because Venezuela was not core to anyone else's immediate security. Taiwan is different. Every move across the Taiwan Strait is watched. Allies are alert. Competitors are calculating. The Indo-Pacific is a tightly interconnected network of security commitments, economic ties, and strategic deterrence. A failed or partial decapitation strike would instantly reshape that network. Military assets would reposition. Alliances would tighten. Economic pressure would escalate. Signals intended to intimidate could instead embolden coalition responses. A region that is interconnected cannot treat a local event as local. Furthermore, Beijing's messaging would be scrutinized internationally. Any aggression, even surgical, risks a cascade of diplomatic isolation. Support for Taiwan could accelerate not just in Washington, but in Tokyo, Canberra, Seoul, and European capitals. In other words, the operational risk is dwarfed by the strategic risk. Success cannot be measured in a single night. Failure would reverberate for years. And this is precisely why any consideration of the future, whether good, mediocre, or catastrophic, must account for multiple scenarios, not a single heroic strike. Looking ahead, three possible scenarios emerge, each shaped by intent, capability, and consequence. Best case, China hesitates, Taiwan strengthens its defenses, and US commitments reinforce deterrence. The region stabilizes, alliances hold, lessons are learned without a single shot fired, political continuity and social resilience remain intact. Medium case, Beijing tests its capabilities with limited actions, aiming for intimidation rather than full unification. Taiwan absorbs the shock, responds decisively, and global powers adjust postures. Tensions rise, but miscalculation is avoided. The result is an uneasy equilibrium alert, tense but survivable. Worst case, an overconfident decapitation attempt fails or partially succeeds. Taiwan mobilizes rapidly, allies respond militarily, and escalation spirals. Chaos ensues, not victory. Economic disruption spreads, diplomatic isolation deepens, and domestic legitimacy in China is questioned. Even a tactically brilliant strike cannot compensate for strategic misalignment. The lesson is stark. Context matters more than tactics. Precision does not substitute for understanding political, social, and institutional realities. What works in one environment can be catastrophic in another. These scenarios underscore why learning from Venezuela is not about imitation, but about insight, about understanding risk, complexity, and the limits of force. The final insight is clear. Power without context is illusion. Operation Absolute Resolve dazzled the world with speed, precision, and success. But it succeeded because the environment was ripe, because Venezuela's system was fragile, hollowed, and vulnerable. Taiwan is not Venezuela. Its institutions are robust, its people vigilant, its alliances strong. No single strike, no matter how surgical, can replace systemic strength with fear. For strategists, policymakers, and citizens alike, the takeaway is simple. Military brilliance alone does not guarantee political outcomes. True security comes from preparation, resilience, and institutional depth. And here is your call to reflection. Understand the difference between spectacle and strategy. Share this insight, discuss it, apply it. Because in a world of rapid strikes and viral headlines, clarity of thought may be our strongest defense.